question may be further asked, why, if indeed the matter concerns all Nigerians, are we in the forefront? There are two reasons for this. First, Nigerians tend to discuss personalities rather than issues. And secondly, when they do discuss issues, they do so from a purely sectional perspective. You will agree with me that an issue of such fundamental importance as a system of government best suited for Nigeria deserves the greatest possible consideration it can get. It is in furtherance of this that we at the St. John's Forum have assembled the very eminent personalities you see seated behind me, who will set the tone for the debate, which we hope will continue to reverberate across the length and breadth of this country long after we have dispersed from here. Thank you and welcome. Your Excellencies, very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, please permit me to introduce to you the panel for this public service debate. Seated at my extreme left is His Excellency Chief Emeka Anyoko, CFR, former Secretary General of the Commonwealth, who is the moderator for this debate. Seated to his immediate right is Professor Wole Soyinka, a Nobel laureate and the lead speaker for the motion. Seated next is Mr. Odein Ajumogobia, SANOFR, a former Foreign Minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. He will be the support speaker for the motion. The Deputy Senate President was to be here. Last night, something cropped up, and he has sent Professor Okechukwu Oko to variably represent him. Seated to the far left, to my far right, is Dr. Abdul Rauf Mustafa, an associate professor at the University of Oxford in England. He will be the support speaker against the motion. Your Excellencies, very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, my job is done. I now hand over to the moderator to direct this debate. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, my first words must be to commend St. John's Forum for organizing this debate. It is a public service which I believe will not only inform the audience, you ladies and gentlemen who are here, but also the wider public in the country. And this debate is coming up at a especially opportune moment because we have ongoing now a national conference, the aim of which, from what our president said, is to sanitize our politics and discuss ways of how to ensure that this country achieves peace, stability, and socioeconomic development. There's an Igbo proverb which says that a twice married woman is in a good position to tell what makes a successful husband. We in Nigeria have experienced the parliamentary system. We started off our independence with a parliamentary system, and then we changed from that to what we now have. I hope that this debate will enlighten us on the merits and demerits of the two systems. As a moderator of the debate, I shall scrupulously avoid taking sides, certainly not before the votes which I hope will take place at the end of the debate. But in terms of ground rules, Professor Soyinka will move the motion and speak for 15 minutes, and Professor Oko will oppose the motion and speak for 15 minutes. And after that, the support speakers, Mr. Odeyin Ajumogobia, will speak for 10 minutes, and Dr. Abdul Mustafa will also speak for 10 minutes. I have asked a timekeeper, IK, who will, when they have 2 minutes left, ring a bell just to tell them that they have only 2 more minutes. And at the end of their allotted time, he will ring a bell, and I have told him to be a little kind in the way he rings the bell. I hope that after that, there will be audience participation in the debate, starting with 2 young people. After all, the future of this country belongs more to the young than those of us who are fast passing. And then the audience, I would hope that each speaker from the audience would have about 3, certainly no more than 4 minutes. And at the end of it all, we shall take a vote to see how you've been persuaded by the arguments preferred in the course of the debate. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think these are the ground rules, and it now gives me very great pleasure indeed to invite Professor Wole Soyinka to open the debate.
Good morning, everybody. Let me begin by saying straight away that I find myself in a rather invidious position. Until a moment ago, I wasn't even sure, was I supposed to support the motion? Was I supposed to oppose it? So I tried to straddle the middle ground and then come down heavily in favor of this motion, which I happen to believe in, fortunately. The debate reminds me, the subject reminds me very much of an organization to which I belong, known as the International Parliament of Writers. And that brought to my mind the question, what does the Parliament of humdrum politics have in common with that esoteric organization called the Parliament of Writers? The Parliament of Writers does its work quietly. One of the most important aspects of the manifesto was that it does not claim any right to make laws, does not boast a constituency, except to call the entire world a constituency, And yet it managed somehow to achieve one or two things quietly, fustlessly, including creating cities of asylum for persecuted, menaced writers in danger zones, either as the result of wars and so on. Its cities of asylum received guests from the Balkans. It's a worldwide network now, the Balkans, from even certain fundamentalist areas of the democratic United States of America, of course, from theocratic tyrannies like Iran, danger zones like Algeria, banana republics, etc., etc. In the end, it sort of formed a community of its own. And the parliament, you could say, became the sort of governing structure for this new community, which not many people actually know about. It's a strange, almost pretentious name, Parliament of Writers. But then when you consider that parliament itself derives from talking, it's not as esoteric as it sounds. So in effect, I think I tend to look on us as literary parliamentarian fundamentalists, since we went back to the very beginning of the word parliament. There lies the difference between that sort of organization and the political organization. It didn't make laws. It was not an organization which could be defined, because I think of another talking shop, the present one that we're running in the country, and that brought to my mind the fact that whatever system one is running, so many factors depend it depends on so many factors for making it work. We're not strangers to, in fact, the parliament, quote unquote, the House of Representatives, Senate, etc., being rubbished, in fact, by the very members who are elected to make laws. My mind goes immediately to, for instance, and the parliament, the connection is that the parliament actually offered refuge for one Nigerian, because even from democratic Nigeria, lots of refugees, writers and non-writers. And I remember it offered refuge to a certain Miss Daniel, a journalist, who was threatened with a fatwa, a killing murder fatwa, by one Ahmed Yarima of Zamfara State, who pronounced this murderous fatwa on a Nigerian citizen. And then later, turned out to be a serial pedophiliac, absolutely incontinent pedophiliac, defiant, enjoying the impunity of parliament to act against the purpose of a lawmaking body. So many factors move to sustain, in addition to the system itself, moves to sustain or to thwart the purpose of a talking house. When you consider what is happening in Nigeria today, you can see that there's a straight line between this honorable member and what Nigeria is undergoing so traumatically today, the Boko Haram. The moment a lawgiver assumes the right to call for the death of an individual citizen, and in addition turns out to be a pedophiliac, who then defies the Constitution, the very laws that is engaged to make, and says that his own private religious constitution is above, is more powerful, more authoritative than the Constitution that binds the citizens together and the laws that are made by the very House where he makes laws for the preservation of the integrity of the nation and the rights and the freedom of the citizen. Then, of course, it doesn't matter whether it's parliamentary system you're running or presidential system or whatever it was that the late King of Africa, Gaddafi, called his own, I think it was Jamaria or something like that. So these are interesting names and interesting variations, experiments in human organization. The love of discourse, I believe, is the beginning of social order and social wisdom. So we cannot do without these talking houses. The question is, what do they really reflect? What do they enable or prevent in terms of their operations? I was most disappointed, by the way, that Ahmed Yerima was not recognized in the centennial list as one of the heroes of the colonial amalgamation, side by side with Sani Abacha and company. Well, like legislative houses, it takes all sorts to make up an honorable listing, as lawmakers are routinely designated. And yet we all accept that we need public discourse. Any place that is populated by an elected crowd needs to be reinforced by structures that guarantee the representative voices of the people. Call it presidential, parliamentary, it remains the generative source of socio-political ideas and the powerhouse of social projects. We have very few other options. Within any legislature, there's bound to be those whose entire notion of service is perks and allowances. The same percentage you will find remain alert at debating time under all systems. The same percentage go to sleep. Ask the august elect why they are where they find themselves in the first place, under one system or the other. And most of them, quite a number, might respond, well, it's this way. My people asked me to contest. The percentage that was never elected at all, but bulldoze their way into those hallowed chambers, election after election, will probably remain the same in any system, parliamentary or presidential. The few productive members, either as ministers or frontbenchers, run the powerhouse that creates space for a people's endangered species, etc., protect and transform the environment, protect the needy, negotiate beneficial external economic and defense arrangements, or, on the other hand, run society down to ground zero and yawn at the frustrations of coming generations. I wish to assert, therefore, with all sincerity, that any system is only as good as the quality of commitment of the humanity that runs it. If that is true for nowhere else, it is most certainly true for this nation. Hence, I presume, the quest for a tenable system. A rational and a fully objective, as opposed, I beg your pardon, a rational as opposed to a fully objective choice can only be governed by unique conditions operating in each national environment, including the nature of its own constituent peoples and experience, what they are willing to tolerate and where they draw the line even against their representatives. It includes lessons from the past. All these are variables, even history, since each interest group tends to read and interpret history in its own way, especially societies that have undergone civil wars, that permanently unfinished business, however much people try to forget, or however pious and sincere the healing pronouncements. I make this statement simply because of the contrast it provides. You cannot say that after the experience of a civil war, a people cannot re-examine the protocols that bind them together, whatever the cause of the civil war in the first place. A choice, therefore, becomes a near impossible task, a general objective choice, as a general principle for all societies, becomes nearly impossible, unless, of course, we can seek an objective criterion that is shared by these systems, but can be contrasted in quantifiable terms. Can we think of one? Of course there is. Economics, the cost of democracy, which is what the two systems under consideration, the two main systems, parliamentary and presidential, offer us. The economics of democracy. Which system comes cheaper? Which is less open to fiscal manipulation? Which is more accountable? Which system is less open to egregious levels of corruption? That wasn't the bell, was it? I heard a sound. Oh, thank you. Oh. So, which is the system which moves to a degree that is unconscionable in terms of the engorgement of public resources, the parliamentary or the presidential, which is the system that constitutes a greasy pole around which revolves a spiraling phenomenon known as corruption. It takes energy and money to checkmate corruption loopholes, to track down, for instance, legislative felons, to prosecute them, to protect witnesses and whistleblowers, sideline technicalities, and obtain convictions to serve as a lesson even to the elected. I, on a number of occasions, tried to reify the asphyxiating hold of corruption on the national psyche and its productive processes, and ended up only by inventing a hitherto unheard of hybrid monster named Hydropus, a combination of the hydra-headed monster and the octopus with its myriad insatiable tentacles, Hydropus. Now, if you seek the real home of Hydropus, go into the legislative houses of the presidential system, Nigerian brand. There's a phenomenon called war weariness, and I'll tell you when it settles on one, even outside war conditions. There just comes a point where the public becomes bludgeoned comatose from the sheer monumental volume of kleptocracy that the mind seizes up completely. I believe that the nation under the presidential system is very close to that state. It's a consequence of watching the beneficiaries of a system operate with little or no oversight, providing a cloak of legislative normality to questionable appropriations of its own membership interests. For instance, I ask you, what is constituency allowance? In the system we love to operate, it's called pork barrel, in which you attach meaningless or purposeless or private appropriation interests to an important bill for the entire society. The pork barrel level of legislation in this country is staggering. Is it possible under a parliamentary system, for instance, to put together a lean, mean, and motivated crop of ministers? Well, if there's no solution, I recommend that you permit me to invite the International Parliament of Writers to serve as mentors to legislators. I know I may live to regret that offer, since the ears of some legislators or the other will prick up at that invitation, and the next thing you know, 20, 30, 40 fact-finding commissions under this system will be launched to travel around the entire globe. Oh, with their first ladies, yes, don't forget that. Just to find out how the Parliament of Writers manage to operate, take on even powerful governments, and without any constituency allowance. Thank you.
Good morning. Let me start by clarifying what the scope of this debate is all about. It is not about which system is better than the other, because quite frankly, any argument advanced in favor of one can be used to demolish the other. The argument, the normative question is which system works better for Nigeria? And that question cannot be answered in the abstract. It must be leavened by the contextual realities in which these systems operate. Like my mentor pointed out, it is not the system, it is the operators of the system. To further address this issue, you must understand the history, the environmental factors that shape and drive any system. So coming back to Nigeria, the key question becomes, what system will be better for Nigeria? To answer that question, we have to revisit Nigeria's history. You ask all kinds of questions. Which system would better protect rights and liberties? Which system would better promote accountability? The third question is so very important because the job of a government is not just to lead, but to heal old wounds. Unless you address the past. One of the papers I love reading was it's Professor Wole Soyinka's acceptance speech. I think it was either the past will address the present or the present must address the past. I don't remember. Unless you address the past, unless you address Nigeria's ignoble history, you can't forge ahead with a new system. If you want to know more about Nigeria's ignoble past, I encourage you to read that book I read as a class 2 student. That didn't cost me so much headache. The man died. By Wole Soyinka. It showed you the level of man's inhumanity to man. What man can do to a fellow man if you don't have a system in place to check his anarchic tendencies. It then moves down to this question. If you have a presidential system, you're going to have a powerful man at the helm of affairs. You would also have separation of powers. What separation of powers tries to do is to prevent the rebirth of Abacha. No one man can exercise the kind of power he wielded because you have the parliament to check and balance his excesses. The third one is that he's elected by the people. We feel vested in the process anytime we elect the president. If you have a parliamentary system, it's going to become their government, the government in power, whether it's PDP or APC. The bottom line is they are all Nigerians. So, if you have a president elected by the people for 4 years, it brings some measure of stability to the system. If you have a parliamentary system, you can pull down a government with vote of no confidence. You go figure what will happen if we have this in Nigeria. Yes, I work for National Assembly. I see them at work, and I know what drives them. Certainly, you're going to have a vote of no confidence every other week. So I'd rather have a president who is there for 4 years. The beauty, which is also the downside of presidential system, that if you have a strong president who would embody and exemplify democracy's finest virtues, it takes one man. Can you imagine if we had Professor Wole Soyinka as the president of Nigeria? I can tell you one thing. You would not have this narcissistic outfit called the presidency. You would not have this arrogance. You would not have this imperial ambition that led one man to seek to amend the Constitution for a third term. We need a strong president who would represent both our aspirations and our values. A president is a symbol. He needs to symbolize everything good about the country. So before you throw away the baby and the bathwater, it is not the system. If you have a parliamentary system, then the wheeling and dealing will start. Remember what happened in 1979? MPN couldn't muster the majority. They went into this quote-unquote unholy alliance with NPP, which imploded after 3 or 4 months. So all we need in this country would be a system that will send a message to the future generations. We have lost this generation, but we have no right to burden our next generation. The only way you can protect the next generation is to put in place a system that will address all the questions we've raised. You cannot move forward unless you address the past. You cannot address the past unless you say to every human being, you count. It is not about your status. It is about you. Right now, what you have is a system in place where you are treated based on your status. That is why some people are rejecting the national honors. My late mentor, Chinua Achebe, said, you can't give me CFR. This is not the right time. You have to address what? The past. To address the past, we must make sure that we have a system that operates on limitations and restraints. That is what the presidential system is all about. The ideal is good. The practice is completely different. Again, the operators of the system, every country deserves the government it gets. I didn't make it up. Somebody said it. So we have a system in place. Look, President Obama, the most powerful president in the world, is the president of Nigeria. I tell you that. Obama doesn't have powers. He has to go to Congress. Because Americans said they witnessed firsthand the pain of colonialism. They said, never again. We are going to put in place a system that will check and balance the president. Once you go back to a parliamentary system, all bets are off. You start willing and dealing. The distinguished moderator said it, if you marry two wives, if a woman marries two husbands, he gets to tell you who is the better man. We tried parliamentary system. In 6 years, it imploded, and Nigeria went up in flames. Go and read The Man Died. If you want to reacquaint yourself to the horrors of civil war. I was 10 years old then. I didn't know the enormity of the damage until I read that book, which I still read every other year. So you have to put in place a system that will check it. We have tried presidential system. 14, 15, 16 years. It may not be perfect. No system aspires to perfection. Every system aspires to make its imperfections workable. It may not be the best, but we are still standing. We tried parliamentary 6 years, all hell broke loose. The bottom line is that we need a system that will be people-oriented, that will say to the people, you count. I don't want these folks in Abuja picking my prime minister for me. I want to go to my village and vote and say, you know what, I voted for A, I voted for B. I can't trust them to always act in my best interests. This essence of government is to do what? To improve the lives of citizens. And unless the man knows that he's going to stand for re-election in 4 years, unless he understands that my votes count, he's bound to act with, I'm trying to be very political here because I work for them. Let's just put it this way. Abacha is dead and buried, but his ghost is still alive. Every man in power has a little bit of Abacha in him. We need a system that would maybe not kill, anesthetize the Abacha in these folks. And the only way to do it is to embrace the presidential system that is people-oriented, people-focused, that returns power to where it belongs, the people. These guys in National Assembly, I work for them again, so I'm being very cautious. They have their own agenda. They have their own interests. They have their own motivations. So I don't trust them, and I don't think you should, too. The bottom line is, to find out, to beef up the system that has given us a semblance, I didn't say stability, a semblance of stability for 13, 14, 15 years. Yes, the poor man survived the year, but he saw hell. What is the bottom line? He's still singing hallelujah. So after 14 years, we are still standing. We may not sing hallelujah, but we can learn something from it. Thank you.